Tarry here, where the stories never grow old, and you hear something new every time they are told, and it comes clear. So tarry here, where it doesn't matter your age, and when we gather round the table, we all take the stage year after year. So tarry here.
Welcome to the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org. I'm Fanny Crawford.
And I'm Stash Ziolkowski.
Today is Monday, March 31st. Oh my, 2025. And our theme today is book clubs.
Yes, and I want to point out something, Fanny. We are color coordinated.
Oh, we are. It's
How about that?
I didn't know today was Purple Day.
Neither did I, but it's worked perfectly.
All right. Too bad our listeners can't see how coordinated we are.
Yeah, I know. So I hope did you have a great weekend?
I did have a pretty good weekend. It's hard to remember. That was 24 hours ago.
Did you watch basketball?
No.
Oh boy. The women's basketball tournament has been very entertaining.
Well, we should talk about that. But let me say thank you to Andy for opening our show this morning. I read his a bit of his blog or newsletter this morning. He was in Atlanta, or I guess this was a bit ago, was not this weekend, but he was talking about having been in Atlanta and going to a viewing of President Jimmy Carter's body. He was lying in state in Atlanta, and Andy and a friend went to see him. And
wow.
he was pondering. Andy was pondering the meaning of goodness and different phrases.
Was it an open casket?
I don't remember.
I always wonder when you say lying in state. I wonder why. I always think, yeah, they just brought the box.
I don't know, but it was a commentary on language and the words that people substitute for profanity or for surprise.
Neat.
So saying, "Oh my gosh," and
yeah,
"My goodness," and "For goodness sake,"
I think
instead of saying all those other words that you could say.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, and that made me think that it was important to thank Andy for opening the show.
Yep, and he's giving you another lesson.
Oh yeah.
Right, another him. Well, that is good. I've often wondered why people. Some people can not get through the day without terrible vulgarity. I had summer jobs, and whenever I worked a construction job, I would be like, oh my goodness. By the time I went away home, I would think, I wish I had somewhere washing my brain.
Well, why don't you say a few words about Speak?
Okay.
There's a good word.
Yep, speakstoryseries.com. And if you put that into your phone or your computer or whatever device you have that goes on the internet, you could look up www.speakstoryseries.com and you can get all the information, because you don't want to miss these things. Coming up on April the 8th, second Tuesday of the month at 7:30. If you go into speakstoryseries.com, you will find all the details, time, place, and information about, I'm going to try to say this name properly. I practiced it a couple of times this week. Wistemeni. That's the way I was given to say the proper Native American name for Johnny Moses, who can speak 8 different Native American tribal languages. And he is going to be talking next week at Speak Story Series. A great storyteller. And then a month after that, on, oh, now I'm going to mess it up. I won't mess it up. Let's see. Anyway, check the date. But in May, Adam Booth, and I'm hoping to get there in person to see Adam Booth. I think it'll be wonderful. The only in-person storytelling I've seen lately has been Adam, because of our inability to tolerate going out of the house too far. You know, not just going out of the house, but it's hard. Anyway, poor us, poor me. So speakstoryseries.com, a great lineup. And I will mention the names for the rest of the year: Corrine Stavish, Michael McCarty, Mary Hamilton, Justin Perez, and Sheila Arnold. What a lineup.
That is a great lineup.
Yeah. So
Writing all that down. Okay. Good to know. And you want to say the website one more time?
www.speakstoryseries.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will just say that our next teller for Stories in the Round is Jessica Piscatelli Robinson on the 4th Monday in April. And I'm really looking forward to that. Having just come back a week ago from the National Women's Storytelling Festival that Jessica puts on most years in Fairfax, Virginia.
Wow.
And I had a wonderful time there. So looking forward to seeing her again and hearing what she has to say story-wise.
And I was sorry I didn't get to see your presentation.
Well, I
last
was
month.
sorry you didn't also, but I probably will do it again someplace, although probably further away. Eileen Evans is asking me to come to West Virginia and
Yeah.
do it a couple times there.
The-
So
the-
hopefully
the-
I get to do that.
The pictures that Jose took, I think Jose took those pictures.
Yes, he did. He did.
Of course, were wonderful. And
As
made and made me think, wow, I wish I'd been there.
It was a lot of fun, and we had a good crowd. A lot of the old regulars that you would recognize, and they were very patient with me. They actually were willing to listen or encouraged me to keep telling for an additional almost 50 minutes, certainly
Wow.
45 minutes beyond the scheduled time. I kept saying, "You sure you don't want to stop?" And they were, no, go on. So I
Well,
did. I
you
was
know,
astonished.
when you're doing a good job, it's worth
Well,
listening to.
Or else
I
they're
mean,
just
you know, when a teller gets your attention, and you are very good at that, and very good with your stories, you know.
they might have just been humoring me.
Right.
So our theme today of book clubs.
Book clubs.
Would you like to start us out?
Well, but yeah, I'm going to start you out with what I think is a sad story about a book club. And you may have heard me talk about this before. I don't know if I did it on radio or not. Years ago, when I was a young teacher and a young track coach, and I was very interested in having kids get involved in lots of different things. And also at the same time, I became aware of people who were very intolerant of youngsters who I don't know, easiest. I want to say that I don't want to use any kind of language that would affect people the wrong way, but people who are different, you know, like teenage boys who did not date any girls, or uh, you know, and I would hear stories about stuff like that. And I happened to come across a book. I read a lot, and in those days I read even more. There was a time when people would go, say, they gave me a hard time, said, you just carry those books around because you want to impress people. Because I taught math and chemistry, but I would read a lot of really, good stuff. And, in the faculty room, they'd say, oh, no, look at that. He's got another one of those books. And it was good, it was joking, but it was a good way to needle me. Um, but I came across a book, a novel about a man who was a very good runner, a great runner. It was a fictional story, but he also had a very private life. He was gay, um, and as an athlete and as a very good athlete, um, people don't pay much attention to the love lives or intimate lives of athletes. I mean, even today, we follow like world class athletes, um, Olympic athletes, and there's never anything, and no suggestion. Nobody pays attention to their personal life unless they've done something really outstanding, weird, or you know. But um, this guy, was very good, and he became a coach while he was still an active runner, as he, you know, um, and the novel focused on when he was a coach at a school, and it was at a small college, and he was getting to be where he would be not able to compete on a national level as he had in the past, but he could compete very well in age group competition. And anyway, nothing in the book, nothing. There was not even a single sentence or paragraph that was, I'm not sure, that was either vulgar or lewd or you know like in modern novels where they'll describe an entire event between two people or something like that and it's very what do you call it? Not, I was going to say broad, but just blatant language and descriptions of intimate acts, and nothing like that was in the book. But there was no doubt that
his book.
Huh?
He wrote the book.
Who?
This was the book that he wrote?
No. This was a fictional novel.
Okay.
But I suspect it was based on someone. And in fact, when I read it, I kept trying to think of all the, because I followed the Olympics so much, I still do follow the great athletes and stuff. I was trying to think, I wonder who this is based on. But I think whoever wrote it was just trying to just make a gentle statement. Okay. So anyway, at the same time I was reading this, I had got the idea to start a book club. The way our school worked was no athletic practice could start before 3:15, but we were out of class at 2:30. And I was really concerned about that 45 minutes of, my athletes, my runners, And at this time, I hadn't started girls track yet. I was working with a few girls on the side, but not at the school. And so I decided, I think, you know what? I'm going to start a book club, and it'll be a way of keeping them, in the classroom until it's time to go to the locker room. A half an hour, it would be fun. And this was, I think this was maybe the third book. So, and we did this every week. And anyway, one of the English teachers, a lady, thought, she kidded me in the locker room. I mean, not locker room, in the faculty room. Whoa, they called me Mr. Z. Mr. Z, what a nice idea. So you're not just a sweaty old jock who runs around. She used to give me a hard time about that. And I wasn't a sweaty jock in the faculty room. But anyway, she came and she said, "Can I come to this?" I said, "Sure, anybody's welcome." There were some girls in it also who were just students and who found it interesting that there were boys who liked to read, and there was a lot of joshing back and forth. But it was a half an hour, and we would talk about the book, and it turned out that this English teacher didn't read the book. You know, um, I had gotten some copies of it, made it available to the kids, um, but she listened to a discussion, just one, and the very next day, I was called to the principal's office, and he 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 and I got along okay, but he often found things I did irritated him. Like, anyway, and he wanted to know why I was promoting homosexuality and gay behavior. um, it was very disturbing because what I was with this book, what I was trying to get the kids to see was that people are different and you should treat people with respect. And one of the things I talked about, with not in great detail about in that book, was difference in religions. I pointed out to the group, when I mentioned that people were different. Yeah, you should respect people, and that we had in school. I had taken a look around and asked one of the guidance counselors, and I had a list of 5 different religious, not necessarily churches, but religious groups that our students and one of our faculty members were involved in. And I pointed out that, just because somebody goes to a different kind of church or believes in different things in their faith doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. They just, were raised differently, and their beliefs are just as valid as anybody else's. So I was trying to be, anyway, the principal said, either you close this book club or you stop running it. And so the next time we were at a meeting, I told the students that I didn't tell them that I had been given I'd been told off. I told them that it was getting to be too much, and that I found somebody else to run it, and the person who would be running it was an older English teacher, a lady, who I got along with very well and who I'd gone to about it. And she said she would be glad to take it over. And she did. And it became, a good thing. And I was glad they kept it up. But it made me sad to think that something I was trying to do um, had backfired because of, uh, I guess, my preaching about being good to other people and everything. And it wasn't something new for me. I preached it. I taught that in my classroom. I taught that in my athletics, and I tried to show it in my behavior with that. Um, anyway, um, over the years, it was a good reminder to me. And over the years, there was at least there were a few. I did have a few male runners um, who were gay, I guess. One of them who's been married for the last 25 years or so to another man, and who has stayed a friend of mine over the years, written me some wonderful, um, responses to comments I made about different things, and thanked me for being on his side because he was on my team. He was not liked very much. He was teased. It only happened once in front of me, and I threatened to throw kids off the team who had given him a hard time. But he has thanked me over the years for for looking out for him. And all I was doing, and I mean sincerely, is the same thing I had done over the years for guys who, when I first started coaching, who would criticize um, slow runners. Or there was also, when I started coaching, black and white was not a great thing. Black. I had very few blacks on the team, and when I first tried to get black athletes to come out, they gave me a hard time and all this stuff. I told them I didn't care whether they were black or green. All they cared whether they could run. And eventually, I was able to break through that and had some wonderful relationships with black athletes who I still consider would be friends today if we were anywhere near each other. Um, but just this one particular guy who has lived a wonderful life. Um, he wrote to me years later. The only reason he stayed on the track team was he loved running, and he could not believe that I kept him on the team because he was really not. He was not a good runner. In fact, watching him run was like, you won't know this name, but Emil Zatopek, who was a great runner in the 50s, one of the best in the world. When he ran, people suffered because he looked like he was in agony. There were people, Olympians, he was an Olympic champion. There were people who ran against him who hated when he was in a race because he suffered. He was, his face looked like someone was torturing him. And um, but this was true of my runner who he ran, he looked awful. He looked like he had been tortured. I had a coach once saying to me that I should be prosecuted for having that kid on a team because it looked like I made him run and was trying to get him to die or something. Anyway, that book club was short-lived, and I felt bad for the fact that I was told not to continue it, but I understood, and and I didn't want to cause the kids a problem, so that was it.
Do you know what they read after you turned the
Oh,
sponsorship over?
well, I had made a list of books, that I thought we could look at, and they read some really fine books, you know, Les Miserables, and I I believe it was anyway, there were a number of books that I had on that list, and and the teacher who took over thought it was a great list, and And she admitted to me that she would never have read that book. She would not have used that book in a book club. But she, she was an older lady. She was very nice. She and I got along really well. And she said, I understand what you're trying to do, you know, and I admire you. She said, but I'm not willing to do that kind of stuff. Anyway.
Good story. Wow. Well, you're listening to the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org, broadcasting from Martinsburg, West Virginia, Bolivar, West Virginia, and Hagerstown, Maryland. We are not quite halfway through our program.
Really?
Yeah, which
Gosh.
is fine. That's good. It was interesting.
Yeah.
And our theme today is book club. I forgot to say, I'm Fanny Crawford.
And I'm Stash Ziolkowski.
And Stash just talked about a book club that he started at a school and the hot water he got into sharing controversial books. Well, I have a whole different focus today. I do have to say, I have not belonged to many book clubs. I read a lot of books and I share a lot of books and I love to talk about books with others, but I've not been part of many structured book clubs. The one that is most recent is probably that was officially called a book club and met monthly on a regular basis. It was called an African American book club, meaning we were intent on reading books by African American authors. It was in Hagerstown, and I was pretty good friends with the woman who started the book club. She came from California, and she had been organizing book clubs for a long time. Every place she had ever lived, she had started a book club, sometimes more than one at the same time. And I was excited about joining this club and figured this would be great for me. I'd probably read a lot of the books I had stacked up at my house by African American authors, and maybe I could get others interested in those, and I would get to read them. And after the first two meetings, I was terribly disappointed because what the founder of this club had in mind was romance novels by African American women. And that just was not my cup of tea. And I did stay for maybe 6 months and read maybe 4 of the books. And not all of them were awful. I mean, I didn't mind reading a couple of them. And there was even one that was interesting because it was a large part of it was about Caribbean religious groups and African religious gods and goddesses. And I did enjoy reading that. It was parts of it were hard to read, but I enjoyed the conversations. And there were wonderful people, wonderful women in the club that I liked interacting with, like seeing them on a monthly basis, and we would move around to different homes. So I got to know them a bit. And I stayed in the group probably for 6 months. But I was always disappointed because I could not get the group to vote for either classics like W.E.B. Du Bois books or even newer books like Ibram Kendi. I think this was before that, before I was reading him. But it was an interesting experience, and I did get to meet some very interesting women. But I was never really enthusiastic about the books we were reading. Since then, I sometimes read books that book clubs are reading that I'm not an official member of. The Unitarian Universalist Church that I attend in Hagerstown has a women's book club. And I have read a couple of those with the group just to be able to have conversations with the people that I see in church or that I talk to on the phone outside of church. But I have a hard time keeping up with reading on a schedule. Sometimes I will sit down with a book and read it in a weekend or stay up all night to finish a book. But if I'm given a book and told I have 2 weeks to read it, I don't always make it through. But the closest I can come to thinking about a book club that I am an integral part of right now is the health group that I belong to, TOPS, Take Off Pounds Sensibly, that I've been a member of locally in Hagerstown since 2008. So that's what, 17 years, something like that. And I really enjoy being part of that group. I've met some wonderful people, male and female, sometimes couples, occasionally couples, but mostly women. And we do share books back and forth. And actually, I even have a romance novel that I read partly because of that group. We have a romance novel author in our group, and she has given me a couple books that she wrote that I have read and enjoyed. But mostly the books that we read in that group tend to be food related or health related. And so I brought a couple books with me to the show today that I read as part of my engagement with that Take Off Pounds Sensibly group. So the first one that I remember getting excited about is called French Women Don't Get Fat. And it's by a French woman whose name is Mireille Juliano. And she has been for a long time the CEO of Clicquot, the champagne company. They now have a broader product line of quality goods, but expensive. They're called quality goods. But they started out focusing on champagne. She was raised in France. She does have American connections. And I'm not even absolutely positive that she's still alive. I think she is. She's somewhat older than I am. But that book, French Women Don't Get Fat, I happened to pick up. I can't remember how I first heard about it, but I was intrigued by the title, and I studied French in high school and in college. And so whenever I can pretend that I know a little French, I enjoy reading about all things French. And I mean, the same with the Spanish language. I also studied Spanish, so not fluent in either, but like to play with the language. And so when I saw the title of this book, I was intrigued, and I read it, and I read it pretty quickly. It's an easy read, and I also was intrigued by the smugness of the title, the idea that French women are healthier in some way than the rest of us in the world, which may be true. I don't have real evidence either way, but Mireille Juliano did a good job of making a case for the cultural norms in France, at least at the time that she wrote this book, which was 2005, that the general food habits and social habits of French women habits were very different than what was going on in the United States at the time and now. And so I was interested to read it. But what really intrigued me was the response from some of the other members of our TOPS group, our Take Off Pound Sensibly group. We had one woman, her name was June, and she has since passed away. She was in her 80s when we were reading this book, and she was definitely the most enthusiastic reader at the time for this particular volume. She came from a French background. Her grandmother was French, and she was very proud of that. And I guess her grandmother had taught her a little bit of the French language, so she would occasionally show that off. But mostly she just liked exploring French culture. And she read the book in about 3 days when I offered her my copy. And then she did several presentations for us at the health club meetings, talking about the book. So the book itself is divided into 12 and a half chapters. There are some recipes in the books that are interesting, and so it's autobiographical. And Mireille Giuliano talks about her first experience with being overweight and being horrified that she was becoming so pudgy and that her weight gain was interfering with her enjoyment of life. She couldn't do some of the things that she used to do. And she was very young. This was when she was in college and immediately afterwards. And she went to her family physician, who gave her some immediate tips. First, that she should be drinking a lot more water, that she should cut down on soft drinks, and she pretty much stopped drinking soft drinks, and which is unusual to give that up that early while you're still in college. And he also gave her a recipe for cabbage soup. And for the first week of that regimen, she was to eat cabbage soup for at least two of her meals every day. And she did that. She was used to cabbage soup. It was something she ate regularly. She was in the United States at the time going to college, but she had grown up with cabbage soup in her family. And she now touts a leek soup recipe that she's been using more recently and has publicized that. But that idea that you should trade some of the high density foods that you've become obsessed with, like desserts or large portions of meat and potatoes, that there are alternatives that can help you stay healthy, and that if you find the right combination of soups and other foods that you really enjoy, it's not difficult to manage your weight. And of course, one of our problems in the United States, which we talk about regularly at our TOPS meeting, is fast food and buying things ready-made rather than cooking for ourselves at home. And that's one of the things that Mireille Juliana talks about in this book. She also has stories of other women that she worked with who she became mentors to, and how she helped 3 of them lose weight, and they each had different problems, different issues with weight loss and weight gain, and she helped them figure out things that would be easy for them to do and would kind of change how they thought about food. She has a chapter in the book called Moving Like a French Woman, that's about walking and exercising and taking joy in life. So part of her philosophy is, don't do things that make you miserable. Find exercise that you enjoy, find foods that you enjoy that are going to be healthy for your particular physiology, and pay attention to the life stage that you're in, because there's a whole chapter about life stages. And I just found it a very easy book to read. Some of it was laughable to me, in that she clearly cares about things that I don't, like spending a lot of money and traveling, taking big expensive trips that I've done a few. I've done some traveling in my time and was in France for a while, but not like this person. But it's all interesting, and I enjoyed sharing the book with several of my fellow members of our TOPS group and listening to their feedback on the book as well. And from there, we kind of went on to reading other books. My daughter Rachel has frequently brought books to share, and they're often a hit. She has a recipe book called Bananas that features 5 or 6 different kinds of bananas and ways to cook with them. And I've prepared some really interesting recipes. There's a banana pancake wrap where you make a very thin pancake. Not it's the pancake itself is not that unusual. It's something like a crepe, but it's bigger than a crepe, and and but not highly unusual. But then you wrap cooked bananas in that, and it's a really delicious. Can be a main dish or can be a dessert. There's a tropical salad in this recipe book and roasted bananas. And there's a page or two about the different kinds of bananas in the world and how each of them are different and the different things you can do with them. So there's some plantain recipes and a kind of apple called an apple banana that has a faint aroma and taste of bananas, and they cook up differently than our regular bananas do. Rachel also brought us a pumpkin recipe book that I've enjoyed and have made pumpkin chili and several different pumpkin breads, and a pumpkin stew. And then there's a pumpkin stew you can make in a pumpkin. And we've had a lot of fun at our health group with that. And then there was a book called The Good Food Revolution that my friend Rhodey gave me. We went to hear the author, Will Allen, talk about his business and his mission in life, to bring fresh foods to the communities that he has lived in, inner city, urban communities, and his success with that. And that was a very interesting book. And he was a great speaker. We saw him in Frederick many years ago, probably 15 years ago, at least. Will Allen's book, I'll look up the date that it was published, was 2012. So yeah, it has been almost 15 years, I guess, since I heard him speak. So that's the closest I come to a book club, to being an official member of a book club, because reading books is part of my experience there. And then also at the Walking to Wellness group that Rachel and I attend every Wednesday at 12 noon at the Hagerstown Community College ARC, the Athletic and Recreation Center. It has a big indoor track, and there are between 20 and 40 of us who walk there every single Wednesday for an hour. And for the first 5 minutes to 10 minutes of that hour, we hear from a health-related speaker. And I've learned a lot about how to help myself be healthier, how to share health information with other people. And then we walk. And these are very interesting people. And part of the point is that it's a social group. So in addition to walking, we're chatting and sharing our news with the friends that we've made there. And we've read some books together as well. So sometimes as we're walking, we're talking about books, because it's a walking book club as well as a social club. So I'll be quiet now because I think it's Sasha's turn to tell
Okay.
another story.
I would like to, I'll just say something about my favorite book club I was ever a part of. I was the only man in a book club that was at the Sharpsburg Library. And it was my favorite book club because there was no assigned book. The group of ladies, this was run by the lady who was the, librarian there. The, the group of ladies, it was about 6 or 7 ladies and myself. And one of the ladies was my wife. Now, we all read different books and there was no assigned book. And what we did was share about the books that we read. And I was privileged to be in that group because first time I went to it, I figured I would go and look at books and walk around and that. But they made me feel very comfortable. And I thought it was a great book group because instead of having different opinions about one book and different discussions and some that were, um, not agreeable or were agreeable, everyone shared about the book they were reading that month. And it was wonderful because it inspired me to take notes on what the ladies were reading. And then I read a couple of those books. But they enjoyed hearing about the book I was reading. And we made our presentations, and then we had usually there were discussions, a little bit of discussion at the end about the variety of books. And I thought it was wonderful. Um, so many, I think book clubs get to be like, uh, people challenge each other about and everything. But that book club was wonderful. And I thought it was great to share ideas about many books rather than one book and all that stuff, And it was also nice because the librarian, um, and I'm sorry to say my mind is blank. I've forgotten her name. I know the name of the librarian who was the assistant, but anyway, she always brought snacks, which was great. She would bring like cookies and stuff, and it was great. And but I really liked it that there wasn't the not that I was not that I think book clubs are adversarial or anything, but there are a whole bunch of opinions about one book, and there I think that's fine if people want to do it. But I prefer being able to share what I'm reading and listening to the other people about what they're reading, because to me that really spreads the idea of books.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that was so.
How long did you do that?
Oh, I think probably a year, and it was near the end of our. I would say near the end of our tenure in Sharpsburg. The longest place Terry and I have been together. It'll be 30 years in July, and the longest place we've ever been in one place was in Frederick from 1996 to 2006. That was our longest place we've stayed any place. After that, we went to Arkansas for about 6 years. Then Pittsburgh for, let's see, for Pittsburgh, it wasn't very long, about 5 years. And then to Sharpsburg for about 4.5 years. And now we've been in Martinsburg since 2021. It'll be 4 years this year. And who knows where we'll go next?
Who knows?
Yeah, probably we will leave here unless some would be hysterical, because I've over the 30 years you can imagine I've aged, and I've also become unable to walk, and I no longer drive, and so we still try to be active and do things and stuff, but I can't imagine us moving again. However, it doesn't mean I won't. If Terry comes in the room and says, Stosh, I'd like to move to Alaska, I might shiver, but I would say, whither thou go, I will follow.
Oh,
My only Bible quote, which I used to a number of friends in when I lived in when we lived in Frederick, and I was in a card game for 20 some years that had carried over from Westminster to Frederick. And in 2006, when Terry and I had decided to move to Arkansas, my 4 guy friends were really surprised. Why would you do that? Oh, you've lived all your life in Maryland. You know, and I said, whither thou goest, I will follow. And they were shocked. And I said, I'm quoting your Bible to you guys. I said, I would rather be any place with my wife than any place else.
do you remember who said that in the Bible?
No. Goodness gracious. I believe it was in the Old Testament.
Yes,
I know,
it is in the Old Testament.
maybe it's Ruth.
Yes, very good.
There you go. I thought it was, but I don't claim to know a whole lot. I just know that, and I always thought that was just a wonderful statement about a wonderful statement for a person to say about their partner.
Mhm.
Why would you want to be anyplace else but with your partner?
Yeah.
And I know people who have broken up because of that. You know, because of, you know, a job or something. I know of at least one marriage where the husband had a great opportunity for a job,
Mhm.
and the wife said, "I'm not going." And they tried it for a while, but then they wound up separating. You know, in that case, the husband um, took the job because it was in his profession. He was in science, and it was a really good opportunity. And she just didn't want to leave. Actually, she did not want to leave from her friends. She thought it would be hard on her to try to make new friends and stuff.
Mm.
So instead, she wound up a few years later with a new husband.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I had to bite my tongue when I found out she was going to, you know, she met a new guy. I was going to go and tell him, look out. But I didn't. I didn't. Yeah.
People are different.
Yeah. Well,
Well, I guess I have one
I,
other thing I was, what's that?
you know, I think we are at 58 minutes.
Oh, I don't think we're that far in. You
No?
think?
Okay.
I have about 53, not quite 53 minutes, but
Okay.
I could be wrong.
All right.
Did
I'm
you
not
have
going to
your
tell you
timer
you're
on?
wrong.
Did you have your timer on when we first started?
Well, not my timer, but I thought I'd seen 9:30.
It was past 9:30. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I didn't get on until 19:30 and 19. I didn't even come on the Zoom call until 9:32.
Really?
And then we talked for a couple minutes after that.
I thought the Zoom call started at 9.
No, it started at 9:30.
9:30. Oh yeah, right, 9:30. Oh yeah, well, okay. Yeah, right. It was 9:30. When it was not, I started on a Zoom about 9:26 or something with John, and we talked for a
Yeah.
while. So it was after 9:30.
But you are right, because it is already 10:30. So
Right.
given that we had Andy do his opening for us and we chatted for a few minutes, time is probably up.
Right.
Do you have any um, closing words for our audience?
Let's see. Well, I don't know. It is a beautiful day, and this week is going to be busy, of course, seeing Brother Tony and
I
seeing
loved
my.
your picture, your photograph.
Oh, and that, when
on
a
Facebook.
great
Yeah.
Terry was there the day that they brought the bunny, and that is a
Oh,
live bunny.
I thought maybe Terry had brought the bunny.
Oh God, no! Where would she get a bunny?
You never know. Terry knows a lot of
You-
people.
You're right, and
If she wanted to find a bunny, I'm sure Terry
no
could have
doubt, and she had taken Tony outside, and everything, and she does in this special chair, which requires a great deal of help with a lift, and it's called a Jerry chair and everything, and then oxygen and all that. But Tony likes to go outside occasionally, and the bunny was a great, great thing. And
Well, I'm glad your brother got to celebrate with a bunny.
yeah,
I couldn't
and
tell if
she
he
said,
was actually enjoying the bunny or not.
"Oh yeah," she said he really enjoyed it, and
Okay.
so that's good. And
All right. I'm going to go ahead and close out the show.
Okay.
Although it's hard. This is Fanny Crawford,
and Stasi Okowski,
your co-hosts for the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org. We are independent community radio broadcasting from Bolivar, West Virginia, Martinsburg, West Virginia, and Hagerstown, Maryland, offering our listeners a window into the world of storytelling by traditional and non-traditional tellers, encouraging you, our listening community, to share, preserve, and expand all our stories. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for John Case up next.
Yes, we actually are back streaming full time now. It's going to be mostly smooth jazz for the rest of the day here, but I got the machine back up, and so it's
good.
I won't spoil your whole program with the drama of my machine, but just it's a story. It just doesn't have a good end, yet. So
Yeah.
but anyway,
Yeah.
Anyway,
Before you go, can I make a suggestion for next week?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. How about next week we tell some real stories, some story tales or something, and nothing personal.
Okay, what would the theme be? Real stories?
Storytelling.
Are you talking about traditional stories?
Yes.
Okay.
Stories that someone else has written and we might perform on stage.
Okay, stage stories?